Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, I firmly believe that TV can play like music when it's done right. And you know what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion. And you know, if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that you do, because let's face it, you're listening right now. And if you are listening, keep listening and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, give us your 5-star rating on your podcast provider of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. Places like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google. Plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, God knows we would appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Letterboxd, the TikTok, and probably a few other places at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that ultimate kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. On this episode, we are still on the Apple TV Plus train. We're riding it pretty hard. Well, because we love it, quite frankly. It's darn good stuff. So stop arguing with us and go sign up for it as soon as you possibly can. But first off, you should listen to this next conversation we're about to have, because it's us diving into the world of the brand new show with the one and only Colin Farrell, called Sugar. It's a fun one. It's set in Hollywood. It's Farrell plays a private investigator named John Sugar, and he's investigating stuff. But I mean, it's got that feel of Black Dahlia, of LA Confidential. It's got that vibe to it. It's slick and it's smooth, and music is running throughout it, and it is such a fun show. I absolutely love it. But in advance of, well, I mean, the show's out now, it's playing now, but we had a really unique pleasure sitting down and talking with the man who was behind the music supervision for the show, the one and only Gabe Hilfer. And we had some tech issues, but all in all, we had a really good conversation, because we talked about just sort of working with composers, Ali Shahid Muhammad and Adrian Young, who are both fantastic musicians who we love, but also sort of the intricacies of the job, and I mean, always looking for new music and looking for stuff to put into a fun and really cool show like this. But if I haven't said it already, go check out Sugar on Apple TV Plus. It is a fantastic show. But first, enjoy our conversation with music supervisor Gabe Hilfer, because between you and me, it's a pretty darn good one. I mean, obviously, Gabe, first off, I just want to say, apologies about the hiccup for yesterday, but also just thank you for the time today. And I mean, congrats on your work on the show.
No problem, and thank you. How's the power? Power back?
Power is back. It's for some reason in Toronto, like whenever we have the first heat wave, everyone forgets the system forgets how to handle it.
Is that what it? Oh, are you in
with
Toronto?
Everyone turning on their AC at the same time.
I bet, because I mean they've been using the heat for the rest of the year, so
it's that 3-week window where we don't have to turn it on. But
yeah, exactly. There's like a very small window.
No.
So you're watching the show?
Yeah, man, digging it. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, like, how do you get involved in something like this? Because I definitely feels like in watching it, you've got to be there kind of early on, because so much of the mood and the visual feels like it's married to the music as well. Like, I'm kind of curious, at what stage do you sort of get involved in something like this?
I got involved very early from a script stage. I can't remember who reached out to me initially, but I have worked with Audrey Chon and Simon Kinberg, who are two of the producers, before on a couple other things. Mm-hmm. And so we, they were developing this and this getting off the ground, and they hit me up and they asked me if I wanted to read it, and I was hooked from the very beginning. So, and before I even knew all the fun surprises that were ahead of me,
No, I mean, I'm curious, because especially in a show like this where you've got, I mean, obviously these two fabulous composers who are doing the score as well. Like, where does your job entail? Like, is it a question of placement? Is it a question of finding songs for licensing? I mean, or is it even knowing when not to put music? Like, I'm always kind of fascinated on what your job entails because it feels like it's a broad title. If that makes, if
You
that's
know, and certainly is a broad title. Like I have to not only when someone asks what I do for a living, like just a stranger on the street, like I have to like you can't just give them your like job title because
right.
it's a little too broad, like a little too obtuse. So you kind of got to say like this is what I do. But then when you get into that, it's a longer conversation. Um, so every show is totally unique. This one, we were very involved from the beginning in determining the just the tone, the overall musical tone of the show.
Right.
I mean, I when I read it, I don't think that I necessarily uh, would have thought that it was such a noir kind of tone that eventually we fell into. Um, and it was a process. Like it was not like we found it immediately on day one and we just jumped from there. We went through a few iterations. There were a couple hiccups along the way, but Adrian and Ali came on, and I've worked with them a handful of times. Those guys are good friends of mine, um, and they did a fantastic job. You know, they're one of those they're composers who like you kind of put your trust in them, and then they come back with something that's amazing. They're not necessarily like following the temp exactly or being micromanaged like
Yeah.
by people who want to hear a sound. Like you kind of hire them for their artistry and their creativity, and and then you work with them to help get the best out of it. And they're fantastic, super talented guys.
Because I mean, so much of this show, and admittedly, I'm only 3 episodes in, but it
Oh
feels
wow, you're
like
only 3 episodes in.
I'm
You
only
haven't
three
even hit the
episodes
big.
in. Yeah,
You haven't even hit the big surprises yet. Okay, good.
like it plays like jazz, and I mean, does that like, and I mean, just with the ebb and flow of it, and just really sort of the mood and the tone. Like, I'm kind of curious. I can imagine you have to come in at script stage on something like this because if they brought you in sort of after the fact, it would have been probably felt a little clunky. Being involved in this early on has to be a benefit. Like if you given you this sort of when picture lock, it would have felt a little clunkier to kind of put it all together.
But it's interesting you say that because we it wasn't always this jazz. Like it some things there's a definitive tone and a definitive way that like the music and
Right.
the show coalesce together and create like this perfect synergy. Or like from the very beginning, everybody has a very clear directive. This was a little bit of find find yourself and exploration until we found the right musical tone that everybody was agreeing on and everybody was down with. Um, and then it was also about trying to figure out how source music was going to fit in. I mean, the Kamasi Washington,
Mm.
the I mean, that sort of fits perfectly into the jazz motif that you're talking about. Um, but I'm just looking. I have a list here. I have a cheat sheet here of like some of the songs we used because we worked on this like a year and a half ago. So I don't remember every single song off memorized, but there's so many cool songs there, like the Mdu Mokhtar, I mean, there's the on camera stuff with UFO and Cherry.
Yeah,
It was
totally.
like we had a fun time and we were kind of really exploring and figuring out how music could be an asset and not a liability to.
Yeah, so you're talking about UFO and just like sort of finding every like the right pieces that fit sort of not only in camera, but like with stuff you have to use and
Yeah, and trying to figure out the right tone and the vibe from the very beginning, and then how source music would play in and work alongside the score, and how all that would be, you know, pushing this with making it mysterious and kind of edgy without being pandering or corny, and make the songs be an asset. That was the goal.
no, well, and I mean it worked because obviously you did a fantastic job, but I mean I'm curious. It feels like part of your job. While I can imagine there's going to be issues with getting clearance and this, that, or the other, it's just knowing who exists or knowing artists who are out there, knowing sort of, oh, this is obscure and interesting. This will work for this. How sort of in touch or in tune do you just have to be sort of on a day-to-day basis with all different kinds of music?
I have to be, well, very in touch. Or, I need to like have a great overview of what's out there, I think. And when I don't have an expertise in a particular field, or I don't have like a real acumen in a real subset or a genre like that, like I have to know know who to call, where to research, how I can educate myself further in that world. Like I've experienced that. Like I mean, it's not what we're talking about here, but like I recently did the White Lotus in Italy, right?
Mm.
And in Italy, I'm not any expert on Italian music, but I
Right.
knew who to call, and I knew where, like, who is an expert in Italian music, where can we hear some cool stuff, and it was my job to sort of filter it through and figure out like what is the best music that is cool and was working within that subset. I've done it for a bunch of projects, and it's sort of like on an as needed basis, like did it for classical music on Black Swan, did it for heavy metal music on The Wrestler, Italian music here, whatever it is. We have like the ability to it's kind of someone know what you know and know what you don't know, and be honest about it, and be people have said, are you an expert in this kind of music to me before, and or whatever it is, and I'm I don't lie, I'm like, no, but I will be by the time this show's over, so. So I mean, the
Yeah.
answer to your question is also, it's managing everything. It's figuring out what everybody likes. It's figuring out what the producers like, the directors like, what the studio likes, and then how can we afford this and that. And if everybody loves a super expensive song, what's a good alternative, and how do we replace it, and get the same essence of what we're trying to do creatively without spending so much money. And then maybe more targetedly spend money on the things that are a bigger bang for your buck, like an end credit song or a more prominent montage, and less worried about a super expensive song in the background of a restaurant, you know?
Right. How collaborative do you have to be with guys like Adrian and Ali, just in terms on a day-to-day basis? Because I mean, again, you can't be working on stuff that's diametrically opposed to stuff that's they're working on. You guys have to kind of be on the same page.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, one of the benefits of working with them is that we are very close. Like
Mhm.
them and their manager Drew are like a team, super communicative, super like we're all lockstep in terms of a tone. Once we get in there, we did a show together called Luke Cage. We have done a couple other things together as well, and it was the same situation. It was like we're two sides of the musical coin, and we need to figure out how we're going to work together and not be disparate, and like not feel like one of us is not talking to the other one. And like you said, but a lot of it is exploration. Like you'll watch an episode with the songs are in there, but the score is all temp score,
Mm.
and then the new score comes in, and and we're like, oh, this song isn't working anymore because the original score is taking over, and we need the song to be different and like be slower, and we'll readjust. And I think that is the same for them. Like in spotting sessions where we go over the episodes, they'll a lot of times they'll say like, is everybody like, are we keeping this song? Like, does everybody love this song? Because if they are, we'll make sure that the score cue that leads into it is in the right key, it's in a similar tempo, and like it doesn't feel like it's sticking out and butting up against the song, and it's a consensus where everyone's like, yeah, everybody loves this song, so like in this particular instance, let's work backwards and make sure that the score works with the song, and it happens vice versa too.
Now, I mean, I'm curious, do you get to have on camera or like sort of on set moments with something like this? Because I mean, I can imagine that, there's going to be a note in the script. Okay, imagine the characters are listening to such and such is playing. Or does it come down to you getting to actually play that song while they're doing the scene?
uh yeah, we do play the song. I mean, so when I break down a script like very early on, and that's sometimes why we get brought on so early, is because there's two parts. I mean, there's the parts that you need for production, and then there's everything in post production, right? So in this show, for example, in episode one, when they're singing, when they're singing Cherry in the bar, we needed to make sure we knew that song. We needed to make sure we had that on set. We needed to make sure the actors were familiar with the lyrics. We needed to make, and that we could get all the rights and that it was affordable, like all the way ahead of time. And then they can figure out how we're going to shoot it and all the nuances and logistics that go along with that. And then sometimes for dance scenes and they want to know, even if you're not necessarily recording audio on set, you want to make sure that your tempos are locked and everybody is doesn't look like they're dancing off beat, like and terrible dancer. There's all types of situations, karaoke, and the production stuff is always the most intense for me because you need to make sure you're locked and committed and 100% good to go, and you have one opportunity to shoot it. You have multiple takes, but you have one opportunity to really get it done. Post-production is a little bit more of a luxury, the luxury of trial and error, where you can you could take a big risk and be like, I have an idea for this montage, and you can put something up and it could be terrible, but it was but there's no repercussions. Like, even if it's the worst thing anyone's ever heard, you go, my bad, that was a mistake. I see why this is terrible. And then you go and you flip it out and you put something in that, is better. But you're able to maybe, because you have it visually, you're able to really kind of work with the tone and the vibe of the show a little bit more and take risks and see and there's no, you're not committing to it until you mix. So
For sure.
you have more time.
Now, when you do have one of those ideas, like what is kind of the hierarchy for you? Like, do you go straight to your showrunner, or is it depending on who's directing the episode? Like, how does that process break down?
On this show, actually on this show and in general, I think it's about first we'll cut it in with a music editor.
Right.
Whose job is to, physically cut the music in and help really craft it uniquely to the scene and edit it so that it's fading up and fading down and cutting to certain parts and really getting into the nitty gritty of the physical cutting of the song. We'll work with them until we feel good about it, and then we'll present it to, like you're saying, the hierarchy. In this show, there was a handful of producers, and we would send it out to them and say, what do you think? And then everyone would kind of say, love it, I hate it, like something like that. And then eventually the studio sees it and says, we love it and we hate it. And then, and then it's a whole back and forth about how much people want to fight for it, etc.
The eternal note back and forth. No, I understand. I understand completely.
Yep.
No, I mean, just to start. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
No, I was just going to say, I want to start putting a bow on this. Like, I'm always kind of curious how people get into their jobs and how they get into this business. Because, I mean, like you said, we said at the start, if you try to explain what you do to people on the street, they'll be like, oh, you just make playlists for TV. It's like, no, it's not. It's so much more involved than that. Like, what kind of got you into this side of the business specifically?
Well, I'm gonna tell you I'll tell you the concise story. So, I always loved music, always making mixtapes for my friends, all that when I was a kid. Had a radio show and DJ'd in college, bought some turntables, DJ'd a bunch of parties for anyone who would hire me at my own house in college. And then I knew I wanted to get into the music business. So I worked in the music business for a while, for like 4 or 5 years. And through a bunch of different jobs, I landed over at a small little imprint. Mark Ronson had an imprint at J Records called Alito Records. And I worked there for a while, and while I was there, I did some music. This is the early 2000s. I did some music supervision in like a job came through, and they needed help licensing some music and pitching some songs for a reality show. And I kind of, as I was getting into it, I was like, this is cool. Like, this is fun. It was left and right brain. It was the creativity, and then it was like the research and the negotiation and the talking to artists and publishers and labels and managers. And then I crossed paths with, in that same role, somebody had approached Mark about an opportunity in a film. And I kind of ran point on a project where I was interacting with a music supervisor from a movie. And I was like, really got deep into it and saw for the first time something that I was like, I really this is enjoyable. This had like a lot of the things I'd liked about the whole reason I had gotten into music in the first place, which was like the ability to hear things first and help expose it to a wider audience, the ability to cater a specific sound to an audience that you're trying. Like when I was DJing, you DJ a party for some people and they'd want a certain kind of music. You DJ another group of people, they'd want a different type of music, and you realize that yes, they were hiring you for your taste, but at the same time, you were providing music for them in service of their party, whatever that was. Whether it was like, say, it was an '80s party, say it was a hip hop party, say whatever it was, you were providing them something. You're a service, right? And in music supervision, it kind of came around in a roundabout way to find a different vocation that was similar. Like if a movie really wants all heavy metal music, it's like figuring out what the heavy metal music is. If something is trying to get a song that's going to evoke an emotion, really, sadness, happiness, whatever, laughter, how can music interface with the crowd and provide that same emotion that the showrunner, the director is going for? And I started to see that early on in like independent film in the early 2000s, and I was like, this is what I want to do. So I just pursued it and doggedly hounded that music supervisor until he agreed to take me on as an apprentice. And then, and then things evolved from there, and then eventually moved to LA and got into it further and further and further. But to your point, there's many distinct parts, but there's the creativity, there's the playlists, there's the keeping up with everything out there in the world. And then there's the and then there's the logistics, the managing the budgets, the managing the different personalities involved. Sometimes it's the actors who are singing, sometimes it's the producers and the showrunners, the editors. All of those people all have a say in the process, and it's figuring out how to get through that gauntlet of people who have a creative stamp on a project and find how what music is going to get them to all agree. And then it's negotiating and figuring out who owns the songs and having relationships with those people. I had a project recently that wanted a song that they could talk about on camera on the next business day. So they wanted to be able to talk about it and then play the song.
Right.
So it was almost like being able to and it needed to be very specific things involved. Like it needed to be an instantly recognizable song by a hugely famous band, but it needed to not be something that was going to bankrupt the show. And it needed to be able to approve in an hour. I mean, you're really threading 6 needles on that. And by having done this for 20 years now at this point, I knew who to call, and I picked up the phone and I was like, here's an opportunity, here's what we're gonna do. And I called them and we got it done and we figured it out. Sometimes you have limitless money, and sometimes you have tiny bits of money. Sometimes you have limitless time, and sometimes you have an hour. So you got to know where, who to call, what and who's going to help you get things done, because it's not possible for one person to do it all, and so there's that part. There's and then this morning I'm tracking down there's a project we're working on that takes place in during World War II. And there's a recording from 1935, and it was only released on shellac in Britain. And we had to, it was like being a private investigator and figuring out who owns it and where's the paper trail. And the company, we found a copy of the actual physical label of the record, and then so it had the record label, and it was figuring out who bought that label, and what giant conglomerate now owns this thing that they probably don't even know they own, and convincing them to license it to us. And so part of it's being a private investigator. Part of it's having relationships and being able to talk to people. Part of it is being creative and knowing what's going on in music, and the melding of all those things while still smiling.
I mean, I love that. But I mean, just a last question just to tie it up. Do you think that's why we're getting more and more sort of diverse array of musicians who are sort of working in the film and TV space. Because I mean, just at the end of the day, to be a musician means to not kind of pigeonhole yourself. But when it comes down to selling records, it's kind of designed to pigeonhole yourself. It's got to be about recreating that next hit. Whereas working in this kind of avenue allows for a lot more sort of creative freedom and expression.
Look, I think you hit on something very interesting. Like, there's a really a very good friend of mine, is a big record producer. He owns a label, and a big, super successful pop music person. And he came over and he played me some stuff, and he said, "How good is this? Isn't this amazing? Like, where can you, like, how can you help me find a place for this in one of your movies or TV shows?" And I said, "I hear you 100%, and I love you, but this is nothing I'll ever be able to use in a movie or a TV show." There's the Venn diagram of what's like a big pop hit and what
Right.
works in a movie and a TV show. They overlap, but they are not the same thing. And you know, oftentimes we work on things that need big giant pop songs,
Of course, yeah.
for sure, and that is relevant, no doubt. But just because it is like recreating the structure or the kind of audio sensory perception of a big pop hit that was its predecessor, it does mean that it might be a bigger hit on the radio. It does increase the chances on the radio and sell a lot of units, but in that's not what we're always looking for. Like, for Sugar's a perfect example. We weren't looking for the biggest hits. We were looking for the songs that fit creatively and they were cool, and we were like digging in the archives and finding cool stuff on independent labels and finding things that it was a very, this project in particular, and oftentimes we find it's very merit based. Like, it's not about like, oh well, this one's way bigger song, so let's use it. It's like, let's listen to three choices and which one works the best for the scene. Period. End of story. It's like merit based, like in terms of what you're trying to achieve. This one is a great song. We love it, but it's not fast enough. It doesn't drive us through this montage with the energy that we're looking to,
Yeah.
give the audience. So, knowing it's not about always being the biggest song. It's about being the right song. And
Yeah.
we constantly are doing that. It's figuring, and again, just the last thing I'll say is it's a little bit of like breaking down what is needed. Sometimes someone will say, no, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. It's a little Goldilocks, like this is too big, this is too small, and this is another, like, and it's trying to figure out what's just right. And sometimes it's psychologically dissecting exactly what the producer, the director, the editor is looking for. I'm like, why isn't this working for you? And it's not like a combative question. It's more like, well, I guess it's cool, but it's a female character on screen, and the male vocalist in the song feels a little too. It just feels like we're not speaking from her voice, and you're like, okay, cool. So like, let's adjust and let's make it a female vocal with that same energy, And they're like, well, also, we've established a tone in the score cue that precedes it. The piano is our main instrument, so we use more piano, and so it's figuring out like the nuances that people aren't necessarily perceptive of on the surface, and subconsciously, like how we're trying to solve these problems. Like, is it the male vocalist versus female vocalist? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Whatever it is. So
No, and I mean, I like that. And I mean, I think that's why I really was digging what I've been seeing in the show, because I mean, especially musically, there are these, obviously layers of familiarity, these really cool things that, will reward a lot of people. But then there's these layers underneath that the people who know will get a kick out of it and get a smile out of, which I really love as well. Because I mean, again, it just goes back to that analogy of like digging through the crates and finding, cool shit to listen to.
yeah, I mean, look, the biggest win for me ever, like the reason I got into this whole thing, the reason I started loving music in the first place was like I loved hearing things for the first time and making mixtapes and making copies of it and giving it to my friends, and like
Totally.
having them hear it and be like, oh shit, I have never heard this before. What is this? Like, and that's the big joy. That's the big like win for me. And it's not always exactly like that because it's not always new, but like finding like a gem, like from the crates, and like finding a B-side on a record, or like an album cut on some deep old soul record, and putting in and giving it the prominence and giving it the stage to be in a TV show and have it be exposed like that. You know, I think the biggest compliment I ever got was working on our show, and someone and one of the artists on it, manager, he texted me the next day, and he said, "We just got a note that our song was Shazammed 65,000 times in the last 3 days." And like, this song has been out for 3 years and it's done nothing. And like, and it's like almost, I mean, and whatever, it's an anecdotal statistic, but it's like there was no other thing that happened 3 days ago other than the show aired. And 65,000 people took the time and took out their phone and put it up to their computer or their TV or whatever. And we're like, what is this? Like, how do I get this song? And that to me is like the exact evolution of why I got into this business in the first place, like, which is like, being able to put cool stuff in and have it be an alternative platform to help promote music that I think is good.
That is the modern day equivalent of running out and buying the record after you DJ'd a party somewhere. And I mean, that really is a beautiful thing, man. But I mean, honestly, Gabe, I've kept you far too long. But just thank you so much for the time, man. I mean, and congrats on your work on the show. Again, seriously, keep it up.
Thank you, and sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm told the internet is back, but we're going.
I understand where you're coming from. All right, talk to you.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.